Good morning, everybody. The story so far of Romans is that somehow we are not right with God given the actions of Adam in the garden. And our passage today is pretty straightforward. It tells us how to get right. We have to declare with our mouths that Jesus is Lord and believe in our hearts that God has raised him from the dead. Or in the Passion Translation, everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be rescued and experience new life. So, the most important things that we can believe, assuming that we want to be rescued and have experienced new life, is that Jesus is Lord of everything and also of us. And on the one hand, this is a little tricky because, as demonstrated in the Garden of Eden, humans prefer to be masters of their own little universe. Thank you very much. But on the other, it is the sole requirement for a life after this one, spent in a place where we'll be truly at home. And I don't know about anybody else in the last few months, but shall we say it's been interesting. And in order to cope at the beginning, I happened to have read a phrase. Don't know if you guys have seen it around a lot, but it was kind of the beginning of lockdown. I saw it in several places. That we as Christians were made for a time such as this. And I believe that to be true. We are promised that we will be looked after by the creator of the universe. And so I was like, right, I am going to be made for a time like this. And to ensure I remembered it, I wrote it in my prayer journal. And that I said that I would try to be the best version of me that I could be. And I would try to be of help to those who I came across that would need my help. And the only problem is that after 6 weeks, I wrote myself a list of reminders about the poor behaviour that I'd witnessed in myself. I tried to look at how I might remedy those behaviours, and they included, judgmentalism, ill-temperedness, and just generally a lack of joy and peace. So not entirely the most stunning success, all things considered. And it got me thinking, if I am to be made for a time like this, and I really want Jesus to be Lord of my life, something has to change. And I had then happened to be listening to some YouTube, and there was somebody who pastors a very large church in America, and they had some very sensible advice. Their story had been that they'd become the pastor at an extremely young age, sometime in their 20s, and that half the church had left as a result. So great start. But he found that God's plan for him was to have a very particular message, and he found that people started to tune in online when he posted. He said he wasn't doing anything very exciting online, but somehow it really attracted an audience. And so obviously then he built up, and he now runs a large church, and he now has millions of people who listen to his downloads. And he said very simply that what he does is in order to make Jesus Lord of his life, is to spend time discerning what God's plan is for him, and then he turns it into a vision of sorts, which he then follows. And every day he tests his motives and his plans for the day against that vision. And so, do I know what God's plan is for me? Well, actually, probably if you'd asked me a couple of years ago, I really wouldn't have known. But actually now, I really feel like I have some elements of a plan. And do you know what God's plan is for you? And if not, that's okay, because in our reading today, it's very clear that we are saved by a simple statement of faith. But what might we be missing out on if we are not allowing Jesus to be Lord of our lives and not listening to his promptings? We are promised spiritual gifts when we are given divine appointments, and we find that we can do things we never thought we could. And we are promised some adventures. I like the idea of an adventure. In particular, in today's reading, we are offered beautiful feet. It says, "How beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news." God's plan for part of our lives is to be called into the Great Commission of sharing what we have found of God's love and the freedom that is available through the death of Jesus. And I thought I would just remind us of the story of Jackie Pullinger, who I'm guessing most people know. She arrived in Hong Kong with her oboe because she was a music student. And she just knew that she was called to be a missionary. And she went into the walled city in Hong Kong, which is incredibly dangerous, and she taught the children to start off with. And slowly over time, she managed to bring drug addicts and gang members into a place of freedom. And her story is really just a set of examples to show us how God equips us for the most uphill of battles, and how to picture and to get an understanding of God's plan for us, and then to walk that out. And as I was trying to find the exact story on YouTube, I got sidetracked by a talk she was giving to other people who desired to be the beautiful feet of God. And she was saying that she sees so many who come on mission trips to Hong Kong and they stay for a couple of weeks before moving on. And she points out that if God is sending you, really in the end, it's all about perseverance. Her life is about just staying in one place, and also about the needs of others and not about our own needs. And she quoted Jeremiah 12:5. If you have raced with men on foot and they have worn you out, how can you compete with horses? If you stumble in safe country, how will you manage in the thickets by the Jordan? So in the case of being the beautiful feet that bring good news, that's about understanding where we are called to go and then where we are called to stay. What situations are we meant to spend time in, or what situations are we meant to return to? For example, if the person rejects and is not interested in what we have to say. And it's an interesting question how it applies to our current situation with things being so difficult. I guess you're like me and you've seen more of your neighbours than you might usually do, or indeed you have family members who have yet to encounter Jesus. Well, first of all, I guess it is right to say that the Holy Spirit needs to be in it. Without him, our words will fall on stony ground. And Jackie said that when she first arrived, she learnt a few words of Cantonese to bring the good news, and absolutely no one was converted. And she was really puzzled, but she thought the answer might have to do with spiritual gifts. And so she went to be prayed for by a couple that she knew who could speak in tongues. And she said she was super embarrassed because she refused to speak out when they told her, right, now it's time you speak in tongues. And she just went, no, I'm not going to do that. But then suddenly it just happened. She went home and she practiced this. And for some reason, this new spiritual gift seemed to unlock the ability to speak to people and to tell them about Jesus. And suddenly the people that she spoke to Jesus, who'd originally went, no, thank you, listened to her and believed and were changed. And it all became really exciting. So I guess, to summarise, how do we get these beautiful feet? So first of all, we should remember that God is working and he doesn't necessarily need us. And in the service last week, I was giving some statistics from Nicky Gumbel from the Alpha course. And he was saying that they are beginning a new Alpha course every week because they have some limits on the number of people that can join a group. But he had so much interest online. And that also there were 4,000 people doing the marriage course and online, and that's another. God is working without us, and sometimes we have to join in, and sometimes we have to make our own plans. The next part of how we get to be the beautiful feet is: do we believe that Jesus is Lord in our hearts? Are we willing to surrender? What are we willing to surrender? Are we willing to surrender everything? And if so, the people I know who have the biggest ministries have gone, yeah, I'm willing to surrender everything. But, that is a tremendously complicated thing. No, I don't know if I'm willing to surrender most things, maybe. And are we willing to go where he prompts us and to go into situations that we might not wish to go into? So I guess we then need to pray for God's plan for us. And this is something that probably needs to happen on a fairly regular basis. Maybe we get some specific time where we go away and we just listen and discern. We read the Bible, we sit, we worship, and then if you're me and you're a bit forgetful, you write it down. Very important. And in particular, we can ask, who do you have ready for us to speak to? Who is ready to believe that we know, or perhaps people we don't know? And then we can ask for the courage to either give it a second go or perhaps to try for the first time. And we should also be praying for more spiritual gifts. Do you speak in tongues? And if not, perhaps God is calling you to do that. How do you start? Well, I I have a fantastic phrase, which is that you fake it to make it, and that means that you just try, you just pretend. Whatever you want to be able to do, you pretend that you can do it, and you give it a go. Maybe it's that you wish you were more prophetic, in which case you can pray and you can try. Again, you need to try with your friends, and see how they react. And that's immensely encouraging when somebody says, "Gosh, that really means something to me." And by the way, you didn't say something kind of very very bland that could apply to everybody. You need to really try and be quite courageous and give it a go amongst people who and aren't going to give you a hard time if you get it wrong. And then you should take your spiritual gifts, and these will open up new opportunities. And I guess just one last thing about praying for God's vision in our lives in general, such an important thing. It's really good to have some way to test out when we've prayed, we think we've heard something, and we could pray. This pastor that I was listening to prayed Psalm 139 verses 23 to 24 when we are doing this discerning, and something you can pray on a daily basis. And it says, "Search me, O Lord, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting." And I really, really like that bit about, test me and know my anxious thoughts, because certainly at this time I'm prone to weird anxious thoughts, none of which have come true. I'm slowly eating my way through all of the food that I've managed to store, and therefore that particular anxious thought did not come to pass. I still have enough pasta to last. If anybody is short, let me know and I will bring some round to you. So I guess taking that time to ask God to really search us is just so helpful in our planning phase with God. And then I guess we can just await the new gifts and the provision and the adventure and the excitement. I will really look forward to hearing if anybody does start maybe saying Psalm 139 verses 23 to 24. I would love to hear what happens. All right, thanks very much.